I want you to try a visualization with me for a second. It is a little weird, but stay with me.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning, you do your normal routine, you get your coffee, take a shower, maybe do a little doom scroll on the phone. You step outside and everything looks completely normal. The traffic is moving, the shops are open.
Right. Business as usual.
Exactly. But then you talk to someone, maybe a neighbor or a coworker, and you realize something is off.
Off how? Like some kind of invasion of the body snatchers scenario.
Not quite that dramatic, but quieter. You realize that everyone around you has just stopped asking questions. It is like the curiosity function in the human operating system just got uninstalled overnight. No one is asking why anymore. They are just nodding. They're just accepting whatever is placed right in front of them.
That is oddly chilling.
Mm.
It is a very specific kind of silence. It is not peace. It is absence.
Yeah, it is not a peaceful silence at all. It is a sterile one. And the reason I bring this up is because the stack of research we are diving into today, and it is a really heavy stack, by the way, argues that this is not a sci-fi scenario. It argues this is the water we are swimming in right now. It suggests we are living through a quiet epidemic.
Yeah, the source material today is pretty aggressive. It is painting a vivid picture of a phenomenon it calls collective stupidity.
Which, I have to be honest, when I first read that term in the notes, I actually laughed. It sounds like something my grandfather would yell at the TV during the evening news. Look at all this collective stupidity out there. It feels a bit dismissive.
It does sound like a get off my lawn kind of insult. But in the context of this research, it is not an insult at all. It is a clinical diagnosis. And that is a crucial distinction we really need to make right at the top of this deep dive.
Right, so we are not talking about low IQ here. We are not talking about people not being smart in the traditional sense or lacking formal education.
Not at all. In fact, the sources argue that highly intelligent, high IQ people are just as susceptible to this, maybe even more so in certain environments. We are talking about a systemic surrender of critical thinking, a state where large groups of people who really should know better just stop processing information independently and start accepting the narrative feed.
Passive acceptance. That is the phrase that kept popping up over and over in the reading. It is this idea that the human mind, which used to be this razor-sharp tool for inquiry, is dulling. And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out why. Because nobody wakes up and says, I think I will just stop thinking today.
No, it is insidious. It happens by design and it happens by biological default. It is really a perfect storm.
So here is the roadmap for what we are doing today. We are going to look at the mechanics of this, how our environment, our education system, and specifically our technology are rewiring us to be passive. And we are going to look at the uncomfortable truth about what it actually takes to get your mind back.
And I will warn the listener right now, this is not a life hack deep dive. We are not going to tell you to drink green juice or do 5 minutes of mindfulness. This is about the structural repair of your own mind.
The stakes are basically this. Do we remain the architects of our own minds, or do we become products of a system designed to keep us comfortably numb? Let us get right into section 1, the trap of efficiency and overload.
Let us do it.
The source material starts with this uncomfortable truth. And it is something I think we all know intuitively, but we absolutely hate admitting to ourselves. Thinking, and I mean real sit in a chair and stare at the wall thinking, is hard.
It is not just hard. It is biologically expensive.
Break that down for us. Metabolically expensive. It sounds like a workout.
It really is a workout. Your brain is a massive calorie hog. It is roughly 2% of your body weight, but it consumes about 20% of your energy. And that is just at its resting rate. When you engage in deep critical analysis, when you are really wrestling with a complex concept or trying to solve a totally new problem, that energy consumption spikes.
So biologically speaking, the brain just wants to be lazy.
Efficient is the polite word,
Yeah.
but yes, lazy. The brain is designed by evolution to conserve energy for survival. It wants to find the absolute path of least resistance. It wants to recognize a familiar pattern and just move on. And modern society has basically become the ultimate enabler of that laziness.
It is like we have built a world explicitly designed to keep the human brain on power save mode.
Exactly. Look at how we reward behavior in our culture. The modern environment rewards speed. It rewards a quick emotional response. It rewards conformity. It does not reward contemplation.
I feel this so much. If I am at my desk and I am just staring into space thinking about a complex problem for an hour, I look like I am slacking off. My boss might walk by and ask if I have enough work to do. But if I am frantically typing away and replying to emails with one-word answers, I look like an MVP.
That right there is the trap of efficiency. We prioritize output over understanding. We prioritize getting it done over getting it thought through. And the source brings up a true heavyweight here to explain the political and structural side of this phenomena, Noam Chomsky.
The Titan, you really cannot talk about this stuff without bringing him up.
You really cannot. The sources lean heavily on his core concept of manufacturing consent. Now, when people hear that phrase, they often jump straight to a conspiracy theory. You know, a bunch of guys in a dark, smoke-filled room plotting the evening news.
Right, the whole Illuminati vibe, they are controlling us.
But Chomsky was making a point that is much more subtle and honestly much more dangerous. He argued that you do not need a conspiracy, you just need a market system. The media, the educational institutions, the political platforms, they all filter information. Not to actively hide the truth necessarily, but to package the world in a way that is profitable and manageable.
Manageable. That word really creeped me out when I read it in the source. It implies we are livestock to be herded.
In a systemic sense, we kind of are. Because a population that thinks critically is fundamentally unmanageable.
Give me a concrete example of that. How does my critical thinking make me unmanageable to the system?
Okay, imagine a standard modern news cycle. Something happens. A scandal drops. A crisis emerges. The system needs you to react in a highly predictable way. Outrage, click, share, vote, buy. The advertiser needs you to feel insecure right in that moment so you buy the product. The politician needs you to feel afraid so you vote for safety.
Right. It is a closed stimulus response loop.
Exactly. But if you stop and say, wait a minute, let me go research the history of this geopolitical region for 3 days before I form an opinion, or if you ask, is this product actually solving a real problem or is it just creating one, you have just completely removed yourself from the economy of that news cycle.
I am gumming up the works. I am the sand in the gears of the machine.
You are. You are being horribly inefficient. Critical thinking slows down the consumption of content. And since our entire modern economy is built on the sheer speed of consumption, critical thinking is, in a very real sense, bad for business. It is inconvenient.
That connects so directly to the data from the neuroscientist Daniel Levitin that was in the notes. This stat absolutely blew my mind. The average person today processes 5 times as much information every single day as they did in 1986.
5 times. Just pause and think about the sheer volume of that.
And 1986 was not the Stone Age. They had television, they had radio, they had daily newspapers. But today it is like a fire hose, straight to the face.
It is. And the brain is not built for a fire hose. It is built for a garden hose. So when you blast it with 5 times the volume, what happens? It does not suddenly get 5 times smarter.
It just shuts down.
It's shortcuts. This is the crucial mechanism the listener really needs to understand today. When the brain is overwhelmed, it stops analyzing and starts categorizing. It defaults to its deepest mental habits. And most dangerously, it defaults to what the source material calls social proof.
Social proof. I actually know this from the marketing world. Bestseller, 50,000 satisfied customers. It is a psychological trick supposed to make you trust the product.
Exactly. In the wild, out on the savannah, it is a vital survival mechanism. If everyone in your tribe suddenly drops whatever they're doing and runs to the little...
You run left.
You run left. You do not stop and ask why. If you ask why and the answer was a hungry lion, you get eaten while you're asking the question.
Right. So thinking equals death in that specific scenario. Yeah. Speed equals life.
But now transfer that exact same biological hardware to the modern information environment. You see a headline on social media. You see it has 40,000 likes. Your brain, which is currently drowning in that 5 times information overload, said, okay, 40,000 people vetted this. It must be true. I will accept it and move on.
I do this. I have to admit, I absolutely do this. I see a high count and I immediately feel a sense of safety. Okay, this is the consensus. I do not need to look into it.
But that is not reason. That is a psychological reflex. You are outsourcing your truth verification process to the crowd because you are just too tired to do the work yourself.
It all comes back to energy conservation.
It does. But that is exactly how collective stupidity scales up. It is not that 40,000 people are inherently dumb. It is that 40,000 people are all trusting each other to have done the reading, and nobody has actually done the reading.
That is genuinely terrifying. It is this massive circle of trust where the center is completely empty.
Precisely. And this leads us to the next layer of the problem. It is not just the sheer volume of information that is breaking us, it is the way we are consuming it. Which brings us to section 2, the erosion of attention and deep reading.
The source brings in the neuroscientist Marianne Wolf right here. She studies this concept called deep reading. And she draws a very hard line between reading a book and what we do online.
This is the critical difference between deep reading and skimming. And it is not just a behavioral difference. Wolff argues it is a profound neurological one.
So you are saying I am actually using a completely different part of my brain when I sit down to read a novel versus when I am scrolling through a feed of short posts.
You are actively using different neural pathways. Deep reading is linear. It is deeply immersive. You follow a complex argument from point A to point B and then to point C. You pause, you synthesize the information, you visualize the concepts. It builds what she calls cognitive patience.
Cognitive patience. Wow, I feel like I have completely lost that. Honestly, if an article does not get to the main point in the very first paragraph, I get physically agitated. I find myself just scanning down, looking for the bold text or the bullet points.
That is the modern rewiring in action. The internet fundamentally conditions us for tab jumping. We scan for keywords. We look for the TLDR, too long did not read. We're actively training our brains to be sprinters, but critical thinking is a marathon.
And if you can only sprint, you can never actually understand a complex issue.
Precisely. You simply cannot explain the nuances of a centuries-old geopolitical conflict or the mechanics of mRNA technology in a format that is designed for sprinters. You need sustained attention. And the catch is that critical thinking absolutely requires that sustained attention. You cannot analyze anything if your focus is constantly fractured.
This reminds me so much of the Carl Sagan quote that was in the source. He saw this entire thing coming back in the 90s.
Sagan was remarkably prophetic. He said, "We have built a society that is exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology."
It is like we are all passengers on this incredibly high-tech airplane soaring at 40,000 feet, and nobody in the cabin knows how to fly it. Not even the people up in the cockpit, maybe.
And Sagan's ultimate fear was that this profound ignorance creates a massive power gap. If you do not understand the system, if you do not understand the algorithm that is determining your mortgage rate or the science behind a major public health mandate, you cannot logically critique it. You can only blindly trust it or blindly reject it.
You completely lose your agency. You are just along for the ride, hoping it does not crash.
You become essentially a peasant living in a world of wizards. The experts cast their spells, the algorithms accomplice policies, and you just have to sit there and hope they are benevolent. That is a very dangerous place for a functioning democracy to be. It is the very definition of mass disenfranchisement.
But it is not just that thinking is technically hard or requires focus, right? The source makes a really interesting pivot here into human psychology. It argues that thinking critically is also emotional painful.
Yes. This is the massive barrier that almost no one wants to talk about. Cognitive dissonance.
Define that for us in this context.
It is the intense mental discomfort you feel when you hold two conflicting beliefs at the same time, or when a piece of new evidence directly clashes with your existing identity. And I want the listener to really check in with themselves right here. When you hear a stated fact that clearly contradicts the narrative of your chosen political tribe, what is your immediate visceral reaction?
Honest answer. Anger. I instantly want to punch the fact in the face. I immediately want to find a reason why the person saying it is a complete idiot or has some hidden agenda.
Right. You do not sit back and think, what an interesting new data point. Let me evaluate that. You think, how can I completely destroy this? Because that fact is not just data to you. It feels like an attack on your very identity.
We really do treat ideas like possessions. If you say my idea is wrong, it feels exactly like you are breaking into my house and stealing my stuff.
The source material puts it perfectly. We do not think we defend. We retreat into our fortified tribal camps. We stop engaging in Socratic dialogue, which is where two people search for the truth together, and we immediately switch into debate mode, where the only goal is to win and humiliate the opponent. We choose the safety of the tribe over the complexity of the truth.
Which brings us to Section 3. Because this intense desire for safety, this built-in compliance, it does not just spontaneously start when you log onto social media. The source traces this conditioning all the way back to the classroom.
Yeah, we have to take a hard look at the factory model of education. This section is heavily influenced by the work of John Taylor Gatto.
Gatto was a public school teacher for 30 years, right? He was even New York State Teacher of the Year.
He was. And he essentially became a massive whistleblower on his own entire profession. His core argument is that the modern school system was not designed to create independent thinkers. It was designed during the industrial age by wealthy industrialists for the specific needs of industry.
They did not need a bunch of philosophers running around. They needed compliant factory workers.
Exactly. Just think about the basic structure of a traditional school day. The loud bells signaling when to move, the neat rows of desks facing forward, The strict adherence to a rigid schedule. The act of raising your hand and asking a superior for permission just to use the bathroom.
It is literal training for an 8-hour shift at the plant. When the bell rings, you move to your station.
It is deep conditioning for compliance. Gatto calls it the curriculum of conformity. As a student, you are consistently rewarded for memorizing the teacher's opinion and then just repeating it back on a test. You are actively penalized for challenging the premise of the lesson.
I vividly remember this from growing up. The kids who constantly asked, why do we actually have to learn this, or is this textbook actually telling the truth? Those were the problem kids. They slowed down the entire lesson plan.
Because curiosity is a dangerous distraction in a factory setting. If a worker on the assembly line stops the conveyor belt to ask, why are we actually building this gadget this way? They do not get a gold star for critical thinking. They get fired. And the source argues that this creates a lifelong ingrained habit. We learn very early on that safety lies in silence. We learn that the person who rocks the boat is the one who gets sent to the principal's office.
And then we grow up, we graduate, we go to work in an office, and the principal's office just becomes the HR department.
Precisely. Gatto argues this heavy conditioning continues seamlessly into the adult workplace. We quickly learn that speaking out, questioning the industry consensus, or holding a truly unpopular view is labeled as being difficult. So we just keep our heads down. We become easy to manage.
But there is an even deeper psychological layer to this compliance, too. It is not just that we are forced to comply by these external systems. The source brings in the psychologist Erich Fromm here from his landmark book, Escape from Freedom.
Escape from freedom. That is such a heavy, profound title, but it explains so much of human behavior.
It sets up this wild paradox. We all walk around saying we want to be free thinkers. We say we value freedom above all else. But Fromm argues that a huge part of us actually desperately wants to be told what to do.
Because true, absolute freedom is terrifying.
Why, though? Freedom sounds great on paper.
Because freedom inherently means total responsibility. If you truly think for yourself and you make an independent choice and that choice goes terribly wrong, who do you blame?
Me. I cannot blame anyone else. I own it.
You. Just you. You cannot blame the church or the political party or your parents or the algorithm or the system. You own the failure completely. That is a crushing burden for the human psyche. Fromm argues that most people deep down would much rather surrender their freedom of thought. They would rather follow a script, even if they know it is a bad script, than face the pure anxiety of staring at the blank page of their own life.
So we willingly trade our intellectual sovereignty for comfort. We basically say, just tell me what to think about this complex issue so I do not have to stress about it at night.
We escape from freedom right into the warm, waiting arms of collective stupidity. It acts like a safe, heavy blanket. We choose to merge with the crowd because the crowd provides psychological cover.
And now in the modern era, we have built the ultimate machine to help us execute that escape from freedom. Social media. This is section 4, the digital battlefield.
And make no mistake, it is a literal battlefield. But the actual war being fought is not between the political left and the political right. The real war is between the algorithm and your attention.
We talked about information overload a bit earlier, but this feels different. This is about deliberate, malicious design. The source argues these digital platforms act as an accelerant for non-thinking.
Yes. The platforms are absolutely not neutral public squares where ideas are just freely exchanged. They are highly tuned behavior modification engines. They are explicitly designed to bypass your slow, critical faculties and tap directly into your base emotions.
How so? Give us the mechanics of how that bypass works.
Look at the basic user interface mechanics. The infinite scroll, the autoplay features. These are designed to completely remove stopping cues. In the old days, you read a physical newspaper, you got to the bottom of the page, and you had to physically stop and turn it. You naturally had a moment of silence to process what you just consumed. With the infinite scroll, the dopamine drip literally never stops. You never get that critical moment of silence to synthesize what you just saw.
And the reward structure of the platform matters immensely, too. The algorithms are not neutral. They actively reward a very specific type of content.
They reward pure engagement. And what is the single most engaging human emotion to keep someone on a screen?
Anger, fear, shock.
Outrage. High arousal, negative emotions. Nuance does not go viral. A post that says, hey guys, this issue is actually incredibly complicated and both sides have valid historical points does not get 1 million shares. A post that says they are evil and they are coming to destroy your way of life gets 1 million shares before lunch.
So the algorithm is effectively censoring complexity. It demotes the truth if the truth happens to be boring.
It aggressively demotes it. And this brings us right to Marshall McLuhan and his famous concept. The medium is the message.
Everyone quotes this phrase constantly, but nobody ever really stops to explain what it actually means.
It means that the format in which you consume the information is actually more important and has a bigger impact on your brain than the information itself. The pipe shapes the water. If you get your daily news primarily from short-form video apps like TikTok, it almost does not matter what the actual news content is. The mere fact that it is a highly edited 15-second visual loop fundamentally changes how your brain processes reality. It implicitly teaches your brain that the entire world is simple, incredibly fast, and largely performative.
You simply cannot understand a 400-year-old historical and religious conflict in a 15-second dance trend format.
But the medium tricks your brain into convincing you that you have. That is the real danger. You watch the short, snappy video and you sit back and think, okay, I get it now. I am informed on this issue. You are not informed. You are entertained. You completely lose the capacity for intellectual nuance and humility because the medium itself does not allow for those things to exist.
And this creates a terrifying dynamic that the source calls the tyranny of the majority.
This is the modern digital idea that viral instantly equals true. We have completely started using popularity as a direct proxy for validity.
Which is a massive logical fallacy, but it has essentially become the operating system of the modern internet.
It is absolute cognitive tyranny. We judge the merit of ideas based entirely on how many other people already agree with them, not on the underlying logic or the actual evidence. If a video making a wild claim has 10 million views, our lazy brains automatically assume, well, it must have some serious merit. But all of human history tells us that the majority is very often completely wrong.
Right. At one point in history, the vast majority of all living humans confidently thought the Earth was the literal center of the universe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the people who said otherwise were punished. But on social media, the majority consensus is the only metric that is visible, and therefore it's the only metric that matters.
Okay, so we have laid out the environment, the education system, the technology. Now let us look inside the hood of the brain itself. Section 5. The War Within. The source material brings up Daniel Kahneman and his seminal book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
This is essentially the user manual for the human brain. Kahneman brilliantly divides all of human thinking into two main systems, System 1 and System 2.
Break those two systems down for us.
System 1 is incredibly fast. It is instinctive, it is highly emotional, and it is entirely automatic. It is the part of your brain that instantly knows 2 + 2 = 4. It is the part that makes you slam on the brakes the millisecond you see red brake lights ahead of you on the highway. It is effortless. And this is where we live our lives about 95% of the time.
And System 2 is the opposite.
System 2 is painfully slow. It is deliberate, highly analytical, and strictly logical. It requires significant conscious effort to turn on. It is the part of your brain that calculates 17 times 24. You actually have to stop walking down the street to do it. It consumes all that high metabolic energy we talked about earlier.
And the ultimate trap here, I am guessing, is that modern life demands we use System 2, but we're constantly defaulting to System 1 to solve these massive problems.
Precisely. Modern marketing, modern political campaigns, and the digital media ecosystem are all explicitly designed by very smart people to exploit your System 1. They package incredibly complex, nuanced socioeconomic issues into perfectly simple binaries. Good versus evil, us versus them. They prime our brains with constant repetition until the narrative just feels inherently familiar. And because it feels familiar system, one happily accepts it as absolute truth without ever waking up System 2.
It feels right in our gut, so we do not even bother to turn on System 2 to go check the actual facts.
And once that initial belief is lodged in there, another incredibly powerful cognitive bias kicks in to protect it. Confirmation bias.
The brain's ultimate defense attorney.
That is a truly perfect description of it. The brain aggressively defends its accepted beliefs regardless of any new evidence presented. I want to ask the listener right now, and I really honestly ask yourself this. How often do you sit down and truly listen to a completely opposing political or social argument with the genuine intent to just understand it? Or are you, like most of us, just listening to find the one logical flaw so you can instantly destroy the argument?
Oh man, I am so guilty of that. If I am in a debate, I am actively preparing my rebuttal in my head while the other person is still moving their mouth. I am just reloading my weapon. I am not actually listening.
We all are. It is baked into our human nature. But that instinct absolutely destroys the capacity for critical thinking. And when you take that individual confirmation bias and you scale it up to a corporate board or a political party, you get the phenomenon known as groupthink.
This is the concept coined by the psychologist Irving Janis, right?
Yes. Janis studied how the intense human desire for social harmony within a tight group predictably leads to incredibly dysfunctional and irrational decision-making. Even rooms full of highly intelligent people, we are talking elite CEOs, top military generals, world leaders, they regularly make catastrophic choices simply because no one in the room wants to be the one outlier. They do not want to be the one person raising their hand and saying, guys, I actually think this is a terrible idea. Because the social and professional cost to dissent is just too high. It is incredibly high. You risk getting fired, ostracized, or canceled. But history consistently shows us that real human progress almost entirely comes from the brave outliers. Think about Galileo, Charles Darwin, Martin Luther King Jr. They were all violently rejected, deeply ridiculed, and relentlessly attacked by the consensus of their time. Thinking critically is, by its very definition, an act of rebellion. You are stepping completely away from the warm safety of the tribe.
So we have painted a pretty dark and stark picture here today. We are fighting millions of years of our own biology. We are fighting our industrial schooling. We are fighting trillion-dollar technology algorithms. And we are fighting our deepest social instincts. It honestly feels a bit hopeless at this point in the deep dive. But the source material makes a hard pivot here. It says there is a way out. There's an actual antidote to collective stupidity.
There is an antidote.
Yeah.
But it begins with a profound philosophical shift rather than a quick life hack. We have to go all the way back to Socrates.
The absolute OG of critical thinking. He has that famous quote, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing."
People often completely misunderstand that quote as just some kind of polite self-deprecation. But it is actually a statement of immense intellectual power. It is about radical humility. Just contrast that Socratic humility with modern digital arrogance. Today, everyone online is socially expected to have a blistering hot take on every single global event within 5 minutes of it happening. Socrates is saying the opposite. He is saying pause, openly admit you do not know the answer, and start the journey from there.
It is true. The actual deepest thinkers in any room are usually the quiet ones. They are sitting back and observing. They are almost never the ones shouting the loudest.
Because they inherently know that true wisdom slowly grows out of silence, not out of constant noise. And this philosophy perfectly leads into the very practical steps the source material outlines for us. The first major step is developing metacognition.
Thinking about your own thinking.
Yes, it is the practiced ability to mentally step back and objectively observe your own internal mental process in real time. Am I reacting emotionally right now? Why exactly did that specific news headline make me so angry? Is this thought actually my own original opinion? Or is it just something I heard a pundit say yesterday and I am blindly repeating it? Practicing metacognition creates a vital gap between the external stimulus and your internal response.
It is like finally becoming the actual director of your own mind rather than just being a passive actor reading a script someone else handed you.
Exactly. That gap is where freedom lives. The second practical step the source pushes is dialectical thinking. This is the mental ability to hold two completely opposing ideas in tension in your mind at the exact same time without your head exploding.
That is so hard to do, though. We desperately want one idea to be the good guy and the other to be the bad guy. It is so much easier that way.
But reality is very rarely a superhero movie. It is rarely that simple. Can you genuinely understand exactly why someone would believe the total opposite of what you believe without instantly dismissing them as purely evil or hopelessly stupid? That takes immense mental strength. But that specific strength is what allows you to move beyond the simplistic binaries that the system uses to control you.
And then there is the absolute necessity for silence. The source drops a beautiful quote here from the philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Yes. To understand the immeasurable silence, the mind must be extraordinarily quiet. We are completely addicted to digital noise. We use it to numb ourselves. We need to intentionally reclaim mental discipline. We have to actively reject our own intellectual laziness. That means putting the phone in another room.
Sure.
Reading the full dense book, not just the 5-minute summary. Reading the entire article all the way to the end, not just retweeting the headline.
It is about actively doing the hard work. But the source material ends on a note that goes even deeper than just reading books. It goes beyond the purely intellectual and gets almost spiritual.
This was undeniably the most profound part of the entire reading for me. The source strongly argues that the core reason critical thinking is rapidly disappearing is not just because we all have smartphones or because schools are like factories. It is because of deep existential fear, specifically the fear of losing our identity.
We attach our fundamental self-worth directly to our adopted beliefs.
We really do. We walk around saying, I am a staunch conservative, or I am a progressive, or I am this specific religious label. We fuse our identity with the ideology. So if I rigorously question the core beliefs of that specific group, I am not just having an intellectual debate about an idea. I am fundamentally questioning my own right to exist within my community. I am actively risking social excommunication.
So engaging in true critical thinking is actually a deeply spiritual act of courage. It is honoring the pursuit of truth over the comfort of belonging.
It absolutely is. It is the hard, conscious decision to live your life with your eyes wide open no matter what you might see. The source brings in Carl Jung right at the end here with a devastating quote. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls.
Wow, that hits hard.
Because shadow work, the painful process of questioning exactly why you believe what you believe, is genuinely terrifying.
Yeah.
It forces you to ask incredibly hard questions. What specific parts of your ego are you so afraid to let go of? What deep insecurities are your loud political beliefs actually compensating for? When you bravely start asking those internal questions, you immediately become dangerous to the external system, but you finally become free within yourself.
That right there is the profound transformation. That is the awakening described in the outro of the text.
When you finally start thinking critically and objectively, you completely change from being a passive consumer of other people's ideas to an active, relentless seeker of truth. You instantly become vastly harder for politicians and marketers to manipulate. You finally clearly see the stark difference between actual education and mere indoctrination. You start to clearly see the strings attached to the puppets.
And the source material openly and honestly acknowledges that this is a very lonely path to walk.
It is a lonely path, but it is an absolutely necessary one if you want to be fully human. The final charge of the material is so powerful. It basically says the single most revolutionary, rebellious thing you can possibly do in the modern world is to just think. Do not shout at people online. Do not blindly conform to the crowd. Just sit quietly and think for yourself.
It leaves us with that deeply haunting final question. Will you choose to stay comfortably numb, or will you choose to finally wake up?
That truly is the defining question of our modern time.
It really is. And to you, the listener, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If you do choose to wake up, if you do reclaim your mind and start questioning the deeply held narratives around you, what happens to your relationships with everyone who is still happily asleep in the matrix? Because that is the real unseen cost of this awakening. It is the potential fracturing of your own social world. Think about that the next time you decide to blindly agree with the crowd just to keep the peace. Take a moment today. Turn off the phone. Sit in total silence and just think. Thank you for joining us on this really intense deep dive.
Stay curious out there.
See you next time.